This week on the video version of the Business of Tech, SSDs and the supply chain woes of 2022, MSP vendor disclosure and bounty programs listed, from Russia to your kids to deepfakes, the threats are evolving, Google and Microsoft reach beyond the operating system, and vaccine mandates and the gender gap in the shift of work. All this and more. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, because it really helps, and here are this week's stories. I previously covered Google's plans to make legacy G Suite accounts into pay ones by May 1st. Well, Microsoft is taking advantage of that. Quote, "If you're a small business that's relied on G Suite Legacy Free Edition, we couldn't help but notice you might be in the market for a new solution," says Jarrett Saparto, head of Microsoft 365. "We've got news for you. Today, you can get a 60% discount on a 12-month Microsoft 365 Business Basic, Business Standard, or Business Premium subscription, along with the help you need to make the move." That is from Microsoft's website and quoted from The Verge. While I'm talking about tools, the Daily Mail in the UK highlighted a survey in Britain that researches working from home. Some findings. 2/3 of Britons surveyed admit setting their laptop camera at an angle to make them look more domineering in business meetings. 56% try to make themselves look busier than they are by regularly leaving Zoom calls to attend another work meeting that doesn't actually exist. 1 in 3 people have tried to appear more committed by claiming to be ill while on Zoom, even though they were perfectly fine. More than 2/3 have scheduled meetings in their office online diary to make themselves appear busier. 45% scheduled emails to go out late at night to make it look like they're working longer. In a similar vein, 22% use the same ruse to schedule emails to be sent early the next day to make it seem they work first thing. Now, why do we care? More importantly, why pair these? Google and Microsoft both know the value of the work layer for software and are courting that space. This isn't even Google's first change lately, as we talked about their email less offering last week. It's the survey data that reveals the opportunity. The tech alone isn't going to cut it. Think about the subtle revelations going on in the use of video calling, with employees using work theater to appear more busy, productive, or engaged. I'd offer this is probably with employers who measure productivity entirely by time. And thus the pairing. Fight over the commodity of the technology itself, or help companies use the technology effectively, which likely involves much advice on how to be effective. Didn't want to miss this story from last week, and here I am quoting from Tom's Hardware. Kioxia, which was formerly Toshiba, and Western Digital have reported that unspecified contamination issues have impacted several of their joint NAND production factories. Western Digital says the problems impact up to 6.5 exabytes of flash memory, but Kioxia has yet to give an estimate of the impact. Given the severity of the disruptions, TrendForce predicts a 5 to 10% price increase for flash in the second quarter of this year, ultimately impacting SSD and NAND flash-based products. However, this prediction only accounts for Western Digital's lost production capacity and could increase when Kioxia releases firm estimates of the impact on its own production. And in that vein, CDW has indicated they believe supply chain issues will continue this year. As reported in CRN, a question from an analyst about the supply chain was given this response. As we look forward into 2022, we don't really see any meaningful end in sight, CDW's Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer said. I would say, as we think about kind of our interactions and what we hear and observe from a partner and product perspective, maybe there's a silver lining there that some of the transparency has improved. So there's a better line of sight of lead times and where things stand, but I'm not sure that we would translate that into any indication that things are going to get better in the near term. Now, why do we care? The supply chain isn't getting any better, not this year, and flash drives even as a specific problem about to hit in the next quarter. Technologists are used to an on-demand ordering mentality, made even more ingrained by the cloud's ability to scale up instantly on demand. With hardware supply chain issues, that instant delivery of technology physically is going to be impacted. It's a reality for 2022, regardless of it being a long-term trend or not. How much will customers bristle? That could be telling, and a more material shift to supply chain management. Those planning projects should incorporate this into their planning. This is a warning-heavy day. The FBI is warning about SIM card swaps, now an escalating problem. The FBI reports that from January 2018 to December 2020, the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center received 320 complaints related to SIM swapping scams, with the damages totaling $12 million altogether. CISA is ordering federal agencies to have the latest Apple patches out by February 25th in response to the Apple WebKit remote execution bug. The Central European Bank of Europe issued a warning late last week to prepare banks for a possible Russian-sponsored cyber attack related to the rising tensions in Ukraine. Proofpoint is warning about a low-skilled attacker using off-the-shelf malware in malicious campaigns aimed at companies in the aviation sector as well as in other sensitive industries. Tracked as TA2541, this actor is thought to be operating out of Nigeria and uses a known pattern of waves of spear phishing emails in English to download files hosted on cloud storage providers, because those aren't blocked inside larger companies. The pattern has been consistent for roughly 5 years. And in high-profile attack news, over the Super Bowl weekend, the San Francisco 49ers were hit by a cyber attack where the Black Byte ransomware gang claims to have stolen data. The leaked data is a 292 megabyte archive of files that the threat actors say are stolen 2020 invoices from the 49ers network. The FBI revealed that this same group hit at least 3 organizations in the U.S. of critical infrastructure in the last 3 months. And, as is the theme today, the FBI has issued an advisory on their comeback. China's rise too is highlighted in CrowdStrike's 8th annual Global Threat Report. China Nexus threat actors are getting better and quicker at weaponizing and deploying exploits for newly discovered common vulnerabilities and exposures. In the past 12 months, they've leveraged new vulnerabilities at a significantly elevated rate compared to 2020. Sentinel Labs released information about Modified Elephant, responsible for widespread attacks targeting human rights activists and defenders, academics, journalists, and lawyers across India. Rather than focusing on data theft, the app's activities are far more sinister. Once inside a victim's machine, the group conducts surveillance and may plant incriminating files later to prosecute individuals. Google reported several pieces of relevant data. Their Project Zero released a report covering its work in 2021. It found that vendors took an average of 52 days to fix reported security vulnerabilities. Between 2019 and 2021, Project Zero researchers reported 376 issues to vendors under their 90-day deadline. Of those 376 issues, more than 93% of these bugs have been fixed, and over 3% have been marked as won't fix by the vendors, according to Project Zero. Microsoft, Apple, and Google account for 65% of the bugs discovered. Separately, the company also announced that it awarded more than $8.7 million to security researchers in the form of bug bounties for thousands of vulnerabilities reported in Google products. The figure is up from the 6.7 million Google paid to security researchers in the previous year, 2020. Google has raised the rewards for Linux vulnerabilities, Kubernetes container management, and Google's Cloud Kubernetes engine. On the criminal side, Chainalysis revealed that victims of ransomware spent nearly $700 million paying off their attackers in 2020. That's up from $350 million in the previous report. And in the news for solution providers, Dana Epp, a well-known security researcher in the SMB space and founder of AuthAnvil, now owned by Kaseya, has published a GitHub repository detailing MSP vendors' vulnerability disclosure programs, including vendors in the MSP space who may or may not have published their vulnerability disclosure program and bug bounty programs publicly. The methodology includes an automatic check against web crawl data with a human review. Now, why do we care? Keeping up with this level of risk review is a specific role in any organization now. I ask who does it at yours or your customers if you sell any kind of security. I have 3 focus areas today. First, let's nod to the range of threats from both highly specialized attackers, specifically targeting individual human rights activists or lawyers with an intentional, planned, malicious outcome, to automated, persistent bulk threats mining for money. This is a long way from a happy open internet. Second is the overall investment from those motivated to provide technology. Google is the example today, with a significant investment in bug bounties and research linked to the data, showing they're also getting some of the return on that investment in the form of fixes. It's an active spend to address the problem. This leads to the third, and it's the review of that repository. If you're delivering IT services to the SMB, this is a list you should be aware of, and pressure for your vendors to deliver on. Microsoft is fully reopening its offices. The company is fully reopening its Washington state locations on February 28, 2022. In this configuration, working from home, work schedule flexibility, and work location are now flexible in negotiation with managers. Employees will have 30 days from February 28th to, quote, make adjustments to their routine and adopt the working preferences they've agreed upon with their managers, and employees must upload proof of vaccination to return to the workplace. Amazon announced that employees vaccinated against COVID-19 could ditch their masks, which started last week, the company said in an internal memo. Face coverings remain required for anyone entering facilities who is not fully vaccinated and for employees who have not logged their vaccination status in Amazon's A to Z internal reporting tool. And in other COVID-related news, J.D. Power released its U.S. merchant satisfaction study last week, and small business owners are more satisfied with their merchant services now than in 2021. J.D. Power found that changes made by the banks during the pandemic resulted in greater trust from small business owners. 73% of business owners said they are aware of at least one change made by banks due to COVID-related challenges, which led to a 71-point increase in satisfaction ratings. Additionally, the study revealed that, with a better understanding of how payment processing fees work, small business owners saw a 33-point increase in overall satisfaction. Why do we care? Can't say I'm surprised by the increase in satisfaction. Let's observe that on January 20th, I reported that only a third of PPP money went to workers and the rest went to business owners and shareholders. When your bank makes it easier to get you money, you like them more. I'll observe we're heading into what could be the most challenging portion of the pandemic, the transition to whatever is next. As public health dictates less of the reasons for dispersed work, workers' desires will be much more at the front. That phrase, working preferences they've agreed upon with their managers, is doing a lot of heavy lifting because it's unlikely that agreement will come quickly, and that's why this is going to be particularly hard. BVoIP, the cloud communications offering designed specifically for IT providers. BVoIP offers a complete unified communication suite, which can also be tightly integrated via Microsoft Teams. BVoIP delivers the modern workforce cutting-edge features, including contact center, integration to your business apps, and real-time visibility into your remote workers. You control the price with a unique hybrid model that avoids the complex dial tone taxation or compliance bullseye. Don't get stuck in a vendor relationship that works against you. BVoIP is a channel-only company that's here to support you. Find out more by visiting bvoip.com/MSP Radio. On Monday, the Biden administration said that a Federal Communications Commission initiative designed to increase access to high-speed internet recently hit a significant milestone. 10 million households have enrolled in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program. The president himself told county officials that money they received from last year's American Rescue Plan should be used in part to lay the groundwork for projects that could be pursued under future rounds of funding through the more recent infrastructure spending plan. So far, local governments have used the money to cover a wide range of programs, including IT, cybersecurity, and broadband upgrades. Both of those stories from State Scoop. More pushback to facial recognition, several lawmakers have asked the Department of Labor to ensure state unemployment programs use secure methods to verify applicants without using biometric software. Senators, too, have introduced new legislation designed to increase tech talent regardless of nationality or visa status, intended to keep international students graduating with at least a master's degree in science, technology, engineering, or mathematics in the United States. The senators appear to be very busy, although this happened back in April of 2021 and was just declassified. The CIA relied on a form of mass surveillance activity that involved the collection of an unknown data set and included the gathering of some records belonging to Americans, revealed in that letter. The details of the program have been kept from the public as well as some lawmakers. And with all the talk of regulation, Americans support data regulation. In a poll by bipartisan advocacy group The Future of Tech, 78% of Americans believe consumers should have to opt in before their personal data is shared. 76% of those surveyed say companies should not collect data and use personal data beyond what's necessary for the service being provided. 75% said they support prohibiting companies from collecting personal data on anybody 16 or under. Now, why do we care? There's a lot of money out there for localities. That's a lot of small business-style government projects. It's a lot to care about for those local government-focused providers and opportunities in the community to use those investments in broadband. I wanted to observe the alignment between sentiment and lawmaking here. There's a solid desire for consumer rights around technology and government action on both sides of the aisle here. Trapped in the middle are technology companies themselves, and while much of the focus is on big tech, I believe that much of the movement will be broader than that. Envision a set of privacy regulations, and regardless of size, they'll hit anyone collecting data. And with the CIA under fire too for hoovering up data, winter most definitely is coming. Ukraine appeared to blame Russia on Tuesday for a cyber attack, indicating the online networks of its defense ministry and 2 banks were overwhelmed in what is called a distributed denial of service attack. An alert from CISA outlines how Russian state-sponsored cyber actors have targeted U.S. defense contractors for information about weapons development, computer systems, intelligence gathering technology, and all over a 2-year campaign. The alert does not specify if classified information was obtained. Still, attackers have been able to, quote, acquire sensitive, unclassified information, as well as CDC proprietary and export-controlled technology, the alert said, by focusing on enterprise and cloud networks, prioritizing their efforts against the widely used Microsoft 365 environment. Google Cloud gave insight this week into Log4Shell. They are seeing 400,000 scans a day for vulnerable systems. The indication is that companies are very much on top of this, but this still serves as a reminder that the vulnerability will remain a target. In a survey conducted by Anchor during the Log4Shell breach, more than 3 in 5 companies were targeted by software chain supply attacks in 2021. The survey also found that more tech companies were significantly impacted by software supply chain attacks at 15% compared to other industries at 3%. BlackBerry's data says SMBs are the increased target, as small to medium-sized businesses face an average of 11 cyber threats per day. According to the report, over 70% of SMBs have faced cyber attacks, and of those attacked, 60% are out of business within 6 months. In the news for parents, video games too are a space for hackers. Vice digs into how scammers are working within Roblox, hacking accounts and stealing virtual items for sale online. The term beamed is Roblox slang for getting hacked and your items stolen. And in shifting tactics for business, the FBI has highlighted how virtual meeting platforms can be used to trick organizations into sending payments to the wrong account. One of the 3 techniques outlined: using a virtual meeting where the criminal will insert a still picture of the CEO with no audio or potentially deepfake audio and claim their video or audio is not working properly. They then instruct employees to initiate transfers of funds via the virtual meeting platform chat or in a follow-up email. Why do we care? The headline feels like "Global warfare conducted online, lock your doors" is appropriate. There's a lot of actionable items here, from continued vigilance on Log4Shell to parents understanding their kids' tech. Let's focus on one in particular: the use of deepfake technology to create virtual participants in meetings. This is where the process is going to be incredibly important. If one can't trust even their online meetings, a lot starts to fail. Is the process specific to digital signatures, identity verification to access corporate meetings, distinct non-email processes for approvals? The answer is yes, and the solution involves clear design insight to make the tech work. Google has announced Chrome OS Flex, now in early access. This version is designed for businesses and schools and intended to run on old PCs and Macs, some of which date back all the way to 2009. The concept: make a Chrome OS image on a USB drive, then replace the existing OS with Chrome OS. It's based on the same codebase. And on the Windows side, Microsoft has released their update to Windows 11 that includes a public preview of Android apps within the operating system. Included too are changes to the taskbar and notepad and media player redesigns. Google had another small announcement here. Their Smart Canvas, launched last year within Google Workplace, has been enhanced and now includes a pageless format for docs and the ability to summarize those documents, among other updates. In another small product announcement I wanted to note, BMW has rolled out Blitz, which lets technicians remotely help customers with everything from roadside assistance to troubleshooting their phone's Bluetooth connection, using video from a live human with face-to-face interaction. Now, why do we care? It's a clear sign of the power of the application over the operating system. Google and Microsoft both are making the reach of their applications broader, thematically showing where the value in the chain is. That's my insight. There's tactical value in the offerings, to be sure, but that's the trend. I admit I added the BMW story to not miss it, because it's a changing expectation of how customer service, particularly technical service, is delivered to customers. How is your help desk working? BMW's gives you a live, on-demand person via video. And last I checked, BMW charges luxury prices too. An analysis by Indeed gives us insight into vaccine requirements in job postings, and somewhat unsurprisingly, politics appears to be the factor on whether a job will have a requirement or not. In January, 7.1% of job postings in blue metros advertised requiring vaccination, compared with 4.4% in red metros. That's the most significant factor over other ones, such as whether or not a job requires in-person work. And it's the size of the gap that's notable to analysts. In a new report from payroll company Gusto, there's a gender gap in the Great Resignation. It's widest in the states with the most childcare disruptions. Quoting from Axios, nationally, 4.1% of women quit their jobs in January, compared with 3.4% of men, a 0.7% percentage point difference. But in Maine and Rhode Island, where around 45% of families reported COVID-related childcare disruptions in the Census Household Pulse Survey, the gender gap swelled to 1.7 percentage points, Gusto found. At the same time, in Missouri and Arizona, where less than 25% of households said childcare was disrupted, the gender gap was close to 0. We've talked about the 4-day work week. Well, in Belgium, it's now law. Workers there have the right to ask for a 4-day work week. Employees requesting a 4-day work week will be expected to work longer hours, but not lose any salary. And before the weekend, I'm going to point to a New York Times piece for good weekend reading. It's about more than just burnout, says the author. Now, why do we care? Lots of regional choices to make, and that's the key takeaway. This is going to be a very local set of decisions. What works for one organization, region, or community will not be the same for another. That's why I threw in Belgium, too, a more expansive perspective beyond just U.S. cities. Want to bring parents and mothers specifically back to the office? You have to address childcare. Live in an area that supports vaccine mandates? You may be looking at imposing one. And if you live in an area that does not, your business may choose not to. That's practical advice. Because it's all tied up in creating an environment that will attract employees to stay. That's the challenge, as the power leans to employees. Google has announced changes to the way it handles user privacy and advertising on Android. Quoting ZDNet, Google remains somewhat vague on a timeline and the specific policies to enforce. It did, however, reveal that one of its primary goals would be to bring its privacy sandbox control scheme over from its Chrome desktop browser to the Android operating system. This privacy management measure ties in tightly with a new solution to replace cookies with something Google claims will provide equal ad opportunities for companies, but an increased level of privacy for users compared to current tracking technologies. Both Project Sandbox and Topics aim to help the company replace Flock, its failed first attempt at replacing cookies, which drew widespread rejection from major players across the web. The company also revealed that it plans to sunset Advertising ID, a major component of Android's ability to provide ad tracking by supplying advertisers with data on users' purchases and clicks, while also helping to determine their specific areas of interest. Google noted that the phase-out would be gradual, with Advertising ID remaining in place for at least 2 years. Why do we care? I think SMBs care a lot about how digital advertising is done, because digital remains the #1 customer acquisition path. This space is shifting fast, so it's relevant to track the new models, because your digital spend is being reshaped. And 2 market conditions insights, both from ZDNet. First, MuleSoft's 2022 Connectivity Benchmark report found that 70% of organizations struggle to provide completely connected user experiences across all channels. At the same time, the report noted that almost 3/4, 72%, of organizations' customer interactions are now digital. Second, FICO released its Digital Consumer Banking and Fraud Survey on Wednesday, which showed that the majority of U.S. consumers intend to remain digital bankers post-pandemic. The study also found that 72% of U.S. consumers feel adequately protected by their banks from fraud, despite the U.S. having the highest reported fraud rate among global respondents. Why do we care? If you need any more data that everything is going digital, it's here. That said, it's not done and dusted. Instead, it's an area of confusion and opportunity. The experiences aren't consistent, and there remains potential for extensive fraud. However, challenging problems bring ample opportunity, and that's why we care. Thanks for tuning in to This Week in the Business of Tech. Shows come out each week, pulling together the daily podcast. If you like this show, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. The content here is possible because of supporters like you. If you want access to shows early, answers to your questions, and private interactions, join our Patreon. It's pay what you want. You decide what the content is worth. Join at patreon.com/MSPradio. Patreons also get access to the written versions of every story as they come out. If you want the stories right away, you can get them on the daily podcast. Find The Business of Tech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Subscribe links at businessof.tech, and I'll talk to you again next week.